You may recall about a few months ago, I gave a sermon where I talked about how in the Middle East there's a sign when you're blessing somebody, they put their fingers together. You may remember this, and they bless like this. But when you curse somebody in the Middle East, you spread your hand out like this, and you curse, right? So it's very close, very similar, right? The only difference is whether their fingers are together or separated. Now, in the same way, in our world, there's a lot of things that separate the human family, right? Lots of different prejudices and racism and sexism and homophobia and doctrines and things that separate us and ultimately curse and divide the human family. And yet there are, the hand has a thumb which is able to work with. It's like a border walker itself on the hand, right, that can work with all the other fingers. See, the fingers by themselves, without the thumb, without the border walking finger, right, the hand they can't really do that much, those fingers by themselves. But when you have a finger that can talk to and understand and work with each of those others, you start to bring it together into a unit where you can bless the world. And so I truly believe that we have a calling in this church, not only to raise our children with a sense of their own giftedness, but also a calling to be the kind of people that help to bring the world together, the community together, by seeing multiple perspectives, working with different people, and bringing it together to bless this world, to bless this community, to bless our families. Families get divided by the same kinds of things. And they need people in the family who can talk to and work with and bring them together to become a blessing. In this church, I think of a couple of, this church is just so important to this community. I believe, and I hope you feel the same way about its importance. When Dr. Wolf, who's celebrating his 50th year of ministry among us in Tulsa, that's worth applause. When he first got here, he led the first interfaith worship service in the city of Tulsa. That nothing like this had ever happened before. And to bring together Baptist and Catholic alone, we can't imagine now. That was bigger than bringing together Black and White, which also came together for a service in the early 60s right here. It couldn't happen anywhere else in our city at the time. It had never happened before. And Tulsa has one of the strongest and most admirable interfaith communities today of any city in America. And that started right here where you're sitting. Because there were 70 ministers of different churches who were ushers. The rabbi was here, and they led a service at the time of the Civil Rights Movement, bringing people together to unite this city. That's something that Dr. Wolf did because thumbs up to Dr. Wolf, right? He was somebody who could work with and talk to, and people respected, and he brought this community together, and it's been blessing this community ever since. When I was, a few years after I got here, there was the Mayor LaFortune, decided that he sort of pushed through the Park and Recreation Board this idea that we were going to have a creationism exhibit in the Tulsa Zoo. Right? The story of one religious tradition's creation in our public zoo to teach our children. Well, that just seemed absolutely wrong, and they had an almost unanimous vote, just one nay vote on the Park and Recreation Board. Well, the next day, I called a meeting up in room 207, and I brought together my clergy friends from the interfaith community, members of this church like Brian Cross and Greg Bledsoe and others, and we got together with lawyers and atheists and agnostics and Jews and people from this community and said, we're not going to allow this to happen. And we by the next month, we were organized. We came to the Park and Recreation Board, and they reversed their decision to do that. Now, it didn't matter because we still had a mayoral candidate, right, this year, that just lost, but got 10% of the vote. With her first thing was going to create a creationism exhibit in our zoo. This church matters. It matters to our kids, and it matters to this community, and it needs to be strong, and it needs to be united, and it needs to be here to continue to bless this city. So I want to ask you, why are you and how are you called to be a part of this church this year? This is the largest, fastest growing church of this denomination, of this kind and this tradition anywhere in the country. Why are you here? How are you able to help? How are you a border walker? How are you someone? What do you have to offer with your gifts? Because the thing about calling is future oriented. It's never about what I did in the past. It always builds upon the past. As a matter of fact, I shouldn't have had Randy play Moses in the children's story. I should have had Dr. Wolf because Moses was almost 70 years old when the burning bush happened. It's not about age. Sometimes we find our calling when we're 70 and do our best work. I've been with people on their deathbed and heard conversations between loved ones and somebody who is dying in their last hours, sharing something that I know was a great blessing, was delivering a sacred bit of cargo from the other world that blessed that person and changed their life like my mom changed my own life by helping me understand who I was and what I was about. You're never too old, and calling is always something looking forward. So you too are called. You too are gifted. You have something to offer. I don't know why you're here, but you do. And I would ask you to search your soul, because as Rebecca Parker says, each of us can have gifts, and our gifts can either bless or curse the world. The reaches of the hand, the touching of our hearts, the words on our lips can bless or curse the world. What, my friend, will you do with your gifts? God bless you. I love you. Amen.